What if the son of a king knocked on his homeland's door, only to be told, "You don't belong here anymore"? It began with a whisper, an unconfirmed rumor spreading through the halls of Whitehall and across the polished floors of the Treasury. Whispers that one of the most recognizable names in the world, Prince Harry, had quietly made an unprecedented financial request. Not a business grant, not a charity subsidy, but a full-scale $10 million loan from the UK government. And that request, once verified, triggered a domino effect of confusion, disbelief, political discomfort, and eventually, outright rejection. But the part that stunned even seasoned observers wasn't that Harry needed the money. It was the reason he was denied. Before we continue, please hit the like button, subscribe to the channel, and turn on the notification bell for updates. You're not a UK citizen, the government reportedly told the Duke of Sussex in a direct, unembellished reply. Those 6 words, sharp and decisive, landed like a guillotine not just on the request, but on Harry's very sense of identity. How had it come to this? A man born into the highest echelon of British society, son of the future king, now being told by that very nation that he doesn't belong, not in law, not in finance, and perhaps not in spirit. This isn't just about a financial transaction. This is about something deeper. Identity, belonging, the weight of history meeting the cold edge of bureaucracy. Prince Harry's loan rejection is not just a banking decision. It's a cultural moment, a legal conundrum, and a personal reckoning rolled into one. And for the millions watching across the globe, some in sympathy, others with a sense of "I told you so," this moment feels like the inevitable consequence of choices made years ago. So how did we get here? To understand the magnitude of this moment, we must rewind the clock to January 2020, the day Megxit became more than just a tabloid buzzword. The Duke and Duchess of Sussex shocked the world with their announcement to step back as senior working royals. For many in Britain, it felt like desertion, a modern echo of Edward VIII's abdication. But for Harry and Meghan, it was framed as a necessary escape from the shackles of protocol, the assault of the British press, and what they later described as a toxic royal environment. They chose freedom in California over formality in Kensington. What followed were multi-million-dollar media deals, bombshell interviews, a polarizing Netflix docuseries, and a best-selling memoir that read more like a psychological case study than a royal diary. All of it added up to a couple who seemed financially independent, emotionally liberated, and professionally driven. Or so it seemed. Behind the glossy magazine covers and high-profile interviews, financial cracks began to show. Sources close to the couple hinted at spiraling costs. From heightened security expenses to multiple property purchases, legal battles with tabloids, staff turnovers, and more. Deals like the one with Spotify ended abruptly. Reports surfaced that their charitable foundation Archwell was spending more than it was bringing in. Still, none of that prepared the public for the staggering revelation that Prince Harry, had personally approached the British government for a loan of $10 million. When the news broke, it ricocheted through the British establishment like a thunderclap. Civil servants were stunned. Political aides whispered about the implications. Was this an emergency measure? A quiet cry for help? Or a calculated financial strategy? Sources familiar with the request said Harry's loan pitch was wrapped in the language of global impact, charity expansion, international partnerships, youth empowerment projects. But no matter the framing, the UK's response came back swift and cold: request denied. At the heart of the rejection was a single devastating legal truth. Harry's residency and citizenship status had changed. Following his decision to relocate permanently to the United States and no longer serve in an official royal capacity, Harry lost certain privileges. The UK government no longer views him, in policy or in principle, as someone who qualifies for such financial support, at least not as a resident or citizen. But is this fair? That's the question burning in the minds of millions, royal fans, critics, legal analysts, and citizens alike. How does a man born at St. Mary's Hospital in London, christened in Windsor Castle, educated at Eton, and trained at Sandhurst suddenly become not a UK citizen? The answer, it turns out, is buried deep in legal clauses, diplomatic interpretations, and tax law. For Harry, this moment isn't just a bureaucratic hurdle. It's a symbolic exile. One that not only underscores how far removed he is from the institution he was born into, but how distant he has become, legally and spiritually, from the country he once served in uniform. For Meghan Markle, the optics are even more complicated. Her critics are already seizing the moment as evidence that she orchestrated Harry's detachment from his roots, that she led him down a path of media celebrity over monarchical duty. Whether that's fair or not remains debatable, but perception, especially in the royal narrative, often outweighs fact. This video will take you beyond the headlines and dive deep into the hidden forces shaping this crisis. We'll explore the full context of Harry's loan request, why he needed the money, how the government decided to say no, and what this says about his current relationship with the UK. We'll break down the exact legal reasons the Treasury cited to deny the funds, and we'll hear from legal experts about whether this rejection was routine policy or a carefully veiled political decision designed to send a message. But we won't stop there. We'll analyze the ripple effects inside the royal family, what Charles knows, how William feels, and why Buckingham Palace remains ominously silent. We'll investigate whether this rejection could affect Harry's long-term inheritance, his title status, or even his children's future rights in the UK. And we'll take a hard look at the financial management of Harry and Meghan's Archewell Foundation, uncovering whether it's in danger of running dry. Then we'll go further. We'll examine the media warfare surrounding the story, British tabloids mocking the Sussexes, American outlets defending them, and social media tearing itself in two. We'll present public opinion data, quotes from royal insiders, and even touch on the emotional impact on Harry as a father, a son, and a man who once walked behind his mother's coffin in front of the world. By the time we reach the end of this journey, one thing will be clear: this is not just a story about money. This is a reckoning for Prince Harry. A reckoning not just with the system that raised him, but with the choices he's made since walking away from it. So stay tuned as we unpack every twist, every contradiction, and every consequence of one of the most jaw-dropping royal revelations in recent memory. Because this isn't just about a denied loan, it's about a denied identity. A prince once born of Britain, now being told he no longer belongs to it. And as the world watches, one question echoes louder than all the rest. If the United Kingdom no longer sees Harry as one of its own, who does? The request itself was shrouded in secrecy. For weeks, only a handful of senior figures in the UK government had any inkling that such a bold financial appeal was sitting atop someone's desk in the Treasury. It was unlike anything they had ever encountered. Not from a business, not from a charity, but from a former working royal, Prince Harry, the Duke of Sussex. A man who had once carried out engagements on behalf of Her Majesty the Queen, now knocking on the door of the very system he had once rejected. According to multiple insiders familiar with the submission, the loan request was meticulously written. It didn't come across as desperate or emotional. Instead, it was framed as a visionary initiative, one that tied together post-pandemic recovery efforts, youth empowerment programs across the Commonwealth, and investment in joint UK-US charity operations. The proposal referenced potential job creation, public relations wins, and rebuilding trust between Harry and his homeland. But for all its careful language, the request carried a stark bottom line. The Sussexes wanted a $10 million bridge loan to fund their long-term philanthropic infrastructure and media projects, with assurances of repayment once revenues from new ventures matured. The immediate question within the Treasury was simple. Why? Why would a couple who had secured multi-million-dollar deals with Netflix, Spotify, Penguin Random House, and Apple TV need a government-backed loan? Had those deals failed to deliver? Were they in financial distress? Or was this something else entirely, perhaps an attempt to position themselves back into the UK's public framework in a way that restored legitimacy? One civil servant, speaking under condition of anonymity, said that the moment they saw the name at the top of the application, their heart skipped. You don't expect to see Prince Harry, Duke of Sussex, requesting funds like a small business. It was surreal. And honestly, it created confusion more than anything else. Nobody knew how to process it. But as strange as it was, the request wasn't technically illegal. As a private citizen, even one with royal lineage, Harry had the right to approach the government with a proposal for financial assistance under certain frameworks. But the process raised immediate red flags. The UK Treasury operates within strict criteria for issuing public loans. Recipients must be UK residents, contributing to UK economic output, and compliant with domestic tax obligations. Harry, now living in California for over 4 years, checked none of those boxes. Still, the application wasn't dismissed immediately. For nearly 2 weeks, discussions were held across departments. There were legal consultations, foreign affairs input, and even security evaluations. Some policymakers worried about the optics. If the loan were granted and leaked to the press, the backlash could be devastating. If denied and leaked, the fallout might still be explosive, but for Harry instead of the government. In the background, an unspoken dilemma hovered in every meeting. This wasn't just any citizen. This was the son of the king. Denying him might trigger diplomatic friction. Approving him could spark public outrage over double standards. The Treasury, already under pressure from austerity critics and a struggling post-COVID economy, knew the public appetite for helping wealthy royals had long since dried up. Yet even as internal debates raged, what few realized was just how precariously timed the request really was. Harry's Netflix partnership, once a cornerstone of their financial independence strategy, had reportedly hit snags. Creative differences, delayed launches, lower than expected viewership numbers. Their Spotify deal had ended with mutual dissatisfaction, resulting in millions lost and no future earnings from the platform. Meanwhile, Archewell, the couple's foundation, was bleeding resources. Staff turnover was high, overhead was growing, and donations were slowing down. An independent audit reportedly showed that while Archewell raised millions in its first year, subsequent years saw less donor enthusiasm as the couple's public image grew more divisive. All these elements formed the backdrop to what was, on paper, a formal and well-written request, but in practice, one rooted in urgency. Not necessarily bankruptcy, but a tightening grip on cash flow, especially as the couple aimed to expand their media empire, cover massive personal expenses including security and real estate, and sustain their foundation's operations without a consistent pipeline of support. The document itself, according to someone who saw it, was padded with strategic buzzwords. Empowerment, healing, impact, restoring trust, and global diplomacy were just a few. Yet stripped of its elegant language, the message was straightforward. They needed money, and soon. What made the request even more unusual was the way it bypassed traditional charitable grant structures. Instead of applying through one of the UK's existing philanthropic bodies or matching it with a private sector partner, Harry's letter went directly to senior officials. Some described it as an attempt to test the waters, to see if there was any political will or royal nostalgia left that could work in their favor. But nostalgia has limits. And in Britain, few institutions are more immune to emotional pressure than the Treasury. As the review period closed, a final recommendation was drafted and signed off. The verdict was unequivocal. Denied. The wording, according to a source briefed on the matter, was clinical and contained no political messaging. It cited only the relevant legal and financial statutes, that the applicant did not qualify for UK government support due to non-residency and a lack of active UK-based economic contributions. No apology, no accommodation, no mention of his royal status. It was, in the end, a rejection that would have been issued to any applicant who lived abroad and failed to meet the legal requirements. But the name attached to this one made it news. The fallout began within hours of the denial. Someone, no one knows exactly who, leaked the information to a trusted media contact. At first, it was vague. Senior UK official confirms Prince Harry approached the government for undisclosed financial support. Within a day, the exact figure, $10 million, was out. Then came the reason. Not a UK citizen. That phrase hit like a thunderbolt across British headlines. Talk radio exploded. Piers Morgan launched a blistering tirade. Social media commentators descended into a frenzy. Some mocked the desperation. Others expressed shock. A few empathized. But almost everyone, regardless of political alignment, understood one thing clearly: Harry had been told, officially and unambiguously, that he no longer qualified as one of them. The symbolism was thick. A man who once stood in military fatigues in front of the Union Jack now turned away from the very nation he once served. The optics were undeniable. What stunned some observers wasn't the denial itself, it was the audacity of the request. One former royal aide commented anonymously to a London paper, "He's lived in America for years, slammed the monarchy, spilled family secrets, criticized British institutions, and now he wants British taxpayers to lend him money? It's delusional." But another source, one closer to Harry, offered a different perspective. This wasn't a handout. It was an investment pitch. They genuinely believed it could have worked if politics didn't get in the way. They saw it as a step toward rebuilding bridges, not burning them. Perhaps that's true. Perhaps the request was as much about financial necessity as it was about signaling to the UK that Harry wasn't finished with it. Not emotionally, not diplomatically, not financially. But the UK's response made one thing clear: it may be finished with him. What makes this moment historically significant is how it crystallizes the ambiguity of Harry's post-royal status. He is neither fully royal nor fully private, neither fully British nor fully American in public perception. He operates in a strange diplomatic gray zone, famous enough to shake global headlines, yet unofficial enough to be rejected for something as mundane as a loan. And in that gray zone, this request, and its rejection, serves as a defining marker. It's the clearest indication yet that the UK is drawing a hard line. You can't straddle two worlds forever. As we continue through this investigation, we'll explore whether this financial misstep was a one-time gamble or the start of a deeper unraveling. We'll look into the personal consequences behind the scenes, the legal barriers ahead, and what this all means for Harry's future, both in the UK and on the world stage. This wasn't just a loan request. It was a litmus test. And for now, it seems, the answer is, you're out. When the official response finally landed in Prince Harry's hands, it came not with ceremony or reverence, but with the mechanical coldness of bureaucracy. No royal seal, no friendly preamble, no expressions of personal regret. Just a formal document with the crest of Her Majesty's Treasury embossed at the top and a curt conclusion that cut deeper than expected. The loan application had been rejected. The grounds? The applicant was not deemed eligible for financial assistance under UK government frameworks due to his non-residency and lack of active citizenship status. At first glance, it seemed like a routine denial, something countless business owners, charities, and individuals face every day. But this was different. This was Prince Harry, a man whose bloodline helped shape modern Britain, a man once considered the people's prince, and a symbol of youthful energy within the monarchy. And now, he was being told in legal language that, in the eyes of the British state, he simply didn't qualify. He wasn't one of them anymore. The impact of that message reverberated far beyond the polished wooden desk in Montecito, where Harry reportedly received it. Inside the Sussex household, the rejection marked more than a failed attempt to secure funds. It symbolized the formal severance of ties that had once seemed unbreakable. Reports later surfaced that Meghan, upon reading the letter, was visibly shaken. Not angry, not indignant, but shocked. Not because they didn't anticipate hurdles, but because the language of exclusion was so absolute. "This changes everything," one close associate allegedly muttered that evening. This wasn't a negotiation. This was a door slammed shut. Across the Atlantic, the UK press caught wind of the situation almost immediately. Although no official government source publicly acknowledged the denial, leaks emerged in quick succession. Political correspondents hinted at a significant figure being denied a substantial request. Within hours, several outlets confirmed the identity of the petitioner. By the next morning, nearly every front page bore the same sentiment. Prince Harry had asked for financial help from the country he left and was refused. The reactions were swift and polarizing. In Britain, headlines were merciless. "Royal handout denied," screamed the Daily Mail. "You're not one of us, Harry," proclaimed the Sun. Even more measured outlets like The Guardian and The Times couldn't help but highlight the symbolism of a former royal being rebuffed by the very system he once embodied. Talk shows, especially those driven by conservative-leaning pundits, had a field day. Piers Morgan launched into an extended tirade on live television, calling the incident the most entitled act of delusion we've seen from this pair. Social media followed suit. Hashtags like #RoyalWelfare, #LoanGate, and #NotOurPrince began trending, each tweet more scathing than the last. Memes circulated at lightning speed. One showed a Monopoly board edited to read Duke of Debt. Another featured Queen Elizabeth II with a thought bubble, "Not with my money, dear." But the mockery wasn't the whole story. Beneath the satire was a deeply serious undercurrent. The national mood had shifted. The public's perception of Harry had moved beyond mild irritation to something resembling indignation. Even among former supporters, the idea of a prince seeking a government loan at a time when millions of Brits were struggling with rising inflation, housing crises, and crumbling public services felt like a betrayal of common sense. Yet the reaction in America couldn't have been more different. On morning news shows like Good Morning America and The View, the narrative was spun towards sympathy. Commentators pointed out how hard it must be for Harry to straddle two worlds, to be born into monarchy yet live under democracy, to be both famous and disempowered. A few even speculated that the denial was a deliberate effort to humiliate him. "Let's not pretend this wasn't personal," said one anchor on MSNBC. "This was a message. And the message was, "Don't come back." From Montecito, there was silence. No public statement from the Sussexes. No clarification. No attempt at damage control. Their PR team reportedly advised against responding immediately, warning that anything they said might inflame an already volatile media storm. But internally, sources suggested that Harry was devastated, not because the money wouldn't come through, but because of what the rejection meant about his place in the world. "It's not about the 10 million, said a friend of the couple to an American journalist. It's about the signal being sent, that no matter what he does, no matter what he gives up, no matter how much he says he wants to make things right, the door is still closed." That comment would later become a talking point in both pro-Sussex and anti-Sussex camps. Supporters argued that Harry was being punished for choosing autonomy over obedience. Critics maintained that actions have consequences, and that you can't spend years attacking the monarchy and then expect favors from the state it represents. Back in Whitehall, the mood was quiet but tense. Treasury officials found themselves in a difficult position, one they hadn't asked for, one they didn't relish. Several civil servants confided to reporters off the record that the request had put them in an impossible bind. Granting the loan could have sparked a political scandal, especially with the public's growing sensitivity to wealth inequality and royal spending. Denying it, on the other hand, risked causing a diplomatic rift, or worse, being seen as petty and vindictive. Ultimately, the decision came down to procedure. Harry didn't meet the requirements. He lived abroad. He paid no taxes in the UK. He contributed nothing economically to the domestic landscape. There were no exceptions in the guidelines. The denial was technically neutral. But optics are never neutral when royalty is involved. The rejection also had ripple effects within the royal family. While the palace remained officially silent, insiders leaked just enough to suggest that King Charles was made aware of the situation well before it became public. Reports hinted that Charles had been approached by a senior aide weeks earlier and had advised non-interference. Whether that meant he supported the denial or simply wished to avoid becoming entangled is unclear. What is clear is that no intervention was made. No phone call to the Treasury. No backdoor attempts to smooth things over. For all intents and purposes, Charles allowed the system to do what it does to everyone else. Prince William's response, meanwhile, remains a mystery. But according to several royal correspondents, the Duke of Cambridge was privately relieved that the government had acted firmly. One source said William had been worried that any financial concessions made to his brother would reflect poorly on the entire institution. Another insider noted that William sees Harry as having made his bed, and now he must lie in it. As the media frenzy continued, Meghan Markle reportedly tried to keep a low profile. Sources close to her say she was concerned about the story spinning out of control, not just because of what it said about Harry, but because of the broader message it sent to potential partners, donors, and business collaborators. After all, if the Sussexes were being portrayed as financially unstable, how would that affect Archewell's credibility? In response, some of their allies in the entertainment world began pushing counter-narratives. Celebrity friends made statements defending their integrity. One Hollywood insider even suggested that Harry and Meghan were testing the waters for a larger diplomatic return to the UK, and that the loan request had been part of a goodwill initiative, not a bailout. That argument didn't gain much traction, but it did reveal how carefully the couple's camp was attempting to manage the damage. By week's end, the media landscape had settled into two polarized camps. On one side, those who saw the rejection as overdue accountability. On the other, those who interpreted it as proof that Harry could never go home again, no matter what he did. But perhaps the most heartbreaking perspective came from a source said to be close to Princess Diana's old staff. If Diana were alive, the source said quietly, she would have picked up the phone. She would have found a way to make it work. She wouldn't have let her son be rejected like that, not from the country he once loved. Whether or not that's true is impossible to say, but it captures the emotional gravity of the moment. This wasn't just about bureaucracy. It was about a country closing its arms, about a son of Britain being told plainly, legally, and irrevocably that he was no longer one of them. In the end, the rejection did more than deny a loan. It crystallized a fracture. It made it official. And it left Prince Harry standing alone, geographically distant, emotionally bruised, and now financially unsupported by the land of his birth. The United Kingdom did not revoke Prince Harry's citizenship. There was no dramatic parliamentary vote. No newsflash announcing his denaturalization. No immigration officer arrived at Buckingham Palace in 2020 to reclaim his passport. And yet, the message delivered with the rejection of his $10 million loan request couldn't have been clearer. On paper, it was about financial eligibility. But in the undercurrent of legal language and government policy, there was something deeper, a reclassification of Harry's place within the nation that raised him. For many around the world, especially Americans, who see nationality as more fluid, the term citizenship evokes a passport or a birth certificate. But in the United Kingdom, particularly when it comes to royal institutions, citizenship is more than just legal paperwork. It's about residency. It's about service. And most of all, it's about perception. At the heart of Harry's rejection was his residency status. According to the Treasury's criteria for financial assistance or loan approval through public frameworks, applicants must not only reside within the UK but also demonstrate ongoing contributions to the British economy, cultural footprint, or public welfare. Harry, who has lived in the United States since early 2020, fails all three of those tests. He does not pay UK income taxes. He does not maintain a UK-based business. And he is not engaged in official service roles under the Crown. This might sound like a technicality, but within the machinery of government, such technicalities are everything. And this one was fatal. Yet legal observers point to a peculiar wrinkle. Harry was born in the UK. He served in the British Army. He carried out royal duties for years. And he has never formally renounced his citizenship. So, by strict legal standards, he still is a UK citizen. The issue, therefore, lies not in his passport, but in the interpretation of active citizenship. In simpler terms, he's not considered functionally British by the very departments that manage public funding and entitlement. The distinction is subtle but potent. A person may retain their nationality but lose the privileges attached to it by virtue of their actions, or in Harry's case, inactions. By choosing to relocate, to pay taxes elsewhere, and to distance himself from the British establishment, Harry effectively opted out of the social contract that governs state support. No one in government came after him. No one stripped him of rights. But when he came knocking, the door remained shut. That's how systems speak. To further complicate matters, Harry's decision to relocate was not a casual move. It was a highly publicized departure tied to what many in the UK viewed as betrayal. The Megxit debacle, though painted by the Sussexes as an act of self-preservation, was interpreted by many royalists and officials as a break from duty. Harry didn't simply move for career reasons. He and Meghan withdrew from active royal service, criticized the monarchy on global television, and set up shop in California, symbolically and physically turning their backs on the institution they once vowed to serve. And while public opinion is fickle, government policy is not. It may take years to craft but only minutes to enforce. By the time Harry submitted his loan request, his new identity, non-resident, non-contributing, and unaffiliated, was set in stone in the eyes of bureaucrats. There was no clause for symbolic legacy. No line that read, "Exceptions apply to former princes who now produce documentaries." In legal circles, there's a concept called the statutory residence test, used by the UK government to determine who qualifies as a UK tax resident. The criteria include the number of days spent in the UK, employment ties, available accommodation, and family presence. Harry doesn't meet any of them consistently. He visits for events, yes, but he doesn't live there. His work is centered in the US. His children attend school in California. His home is in Montecito. The numbers don't lie. And then there's the issue of domicile. In tax law, domicile isn't simply about where you sleep. It's about where you intend to stay permanently. For Harry, that place is now clearly the United States. He has invested in property there. He has built a professional brand rooted in American culture. He has registered his foundation in Delaware. In every legal sense that matters, Harry is no longer domiciled in the UK. That's a crucial distinction when it comes to requesting public funds. Even more revealing is the fact that Harry is reportedly pursuing, or already possesses, permanent residency status in the US. Some sources have even speculated about a future citizenship bid. While there is no official confirmation of such a move, the implications are significant. If Harry becomes a U.S. citizen, he would be required to swear allegiance to the Constitution of the United States and renounce any allegiance to foreign princes or potentates, a requirement that could force a quiet and symbolic death of his titles. All of this adds layers to the narrative surrounding his loan rejection. What appears on the surface as a matter of financial eligibility becomes, upon deeper inspection, a declaration of allegiance. The UK government didn't just say no to a financial request. They said, "You've chosen your path, and it doesn't run through us anymore." The rejection also casts a new light on Harry's use of royal titles. While he and Meghan agreed not to use HRH in a working capacity, they still retain the titles of Duke and Duchess of Sussex. But titles, like all things royal, depend on relevance. And with Harry increasingly divorced from the day-to-day reality of British life, one has to ask, how long can the titles hold weight? Can a duke reside in America and still hold a meaningful connection to the county of Sussex? Or is this all just a ceremonial vestige, clinging to a past that no longer applies? The public seems divided. In Britain, polls show declining support for the Sussexes with each passing year. Their association with the royal brand feels increasingly tenuous. Many wonder whether King Charles will at some point strip them of their titles, a move fraught with political risk but rich with symbolic power. If the monarchy is truly about service, then it's hard to justify keeping honorary titles tied to regions they no longer engage with. In the US, however, the titles still carry cachet. In Hollywood and Silicon Valley, Prince Harry opens doors. It lends gravitas to interviews, documentaries, and philanthropic galas. And yet, the contradiction remains. Harry wants to redefine royalty in a modern context, but he still leans on the very institutions he critiques when it suits his interests. The loan request exemplifies this. He walked away from Britain, but he came back, briefly, when he needed help. That contradiction has become the central tension in Harry's post-royal life. He is constantly balancing two identities. On one side, the rebel who broke free. On the other, the son of a king who cannot fully sever the psychological umbilical cord that ties him to the crown. This balancing act is increasingly unsustainable, and the rejection of his loan request may have finally tipped the scale. For legal experts watching the situation unfold, the case has become a teaching moment in international policy. It highlights the intersection of privilege and accountability, showing how even someone born into elite status is not immune to the legal frameworks of citizenship and public financing. The Treasury's denial wasn't personal. It was procedural. But in being so, it struck deeper than any personal insult could. In private, sources say Harry is struggling with the fallout. Not the media backlash, he's grown used to that, but the emotional weight of official rejection. The kind of rejection that doesn't just close doors, but locks them. Meghan, reportedly, has urged him to move forward, to treat the moment as a lesson, to redirect their focus toward private funding, celebrity partnerships, and independent production. But for Harry, who once saw Britain as both home and heritage, the rejection is harder to compartmentalize. It stings not just because of what it means financially, but because of what it confirms emotionally, that the break is real and likely permanent. Some royal watchers speculate that the rejection may eventually lead Harry to make a difficult decision about his future. Should he formally re-establish UK residency, pay taxes there, and rebuild trust with the government? Or should he go all in on America, become a citizen, drop the titles, and finally turn the page? Either path would bring clarity. But Harry remains stuck in the middle, and the rejection has exposed just how precarious that middle ground really is. In the coming chapters, we will examine how this citizenship controversy spills into other aspects of Harry's life, his inheritance rights, his children's future, and the legal gray area surrounding his dual national existence. But for now, what remains is a stark truth, printed plainly on official paper. Prince Harry may have once been the face of British royalty's future, but in the eyes of the state, he's simply another non-resident applicant. And that makes all the difference. There are few people in the world more recognized than Prince Harry. From the moment he was born, he was photographed, analyzed, and destined to become a pillar of British tradition. But now, in the sprawling estates of Montecito, surrounded by a life that mixes Hollywood glitz with philanthropic aspirations, the man once known as a prince appears to be standing on unsteady financial ground. At the core of this economic uncertainty lies one burning question. Why would a man with royal inheritance, media deals worth millions, and global name recognition need to request $10 million from the UK government? To answer that, we must peel back the layers of public perception and step into the complex web of financial commitments, failed ventures, and strategic miscalculations that now appear to define the Sussexes' post-royal life. When Harry and Meghan stepped down as senior royals in 2020, the narrative was clear. They wanted to be financially independent. They would no longer accept funds from the sovereign grant. Instead, They would forge a path based on their own ventures. For a time, it appeared to work. A reported $100 million deal with Netflix, a multi-year contract with Spotify, lucrative speaking engagements, book deals, and investment partnerships with tech startups gave the illusion of abundance. But illusions don't pay bills. And in the case of the Sussexes, the bills were substantial. One of the most critical financial commitments was the purchase of their Montecito mansion. The property, which spans over 7 acres with a pool, tennis court, guest house, and sweeping views of the Pacific, cost an estimated $14.7 million. Add in renovations, maintenance, staff salaries, private chefs, and 24-hour security, and you're looking at an annual upkeep cost of several $1,000,000. That's not including property taxes and insurance. Then came the security. When the Sussexes left the UK, they also lost automatic security support from the British government. In North America, they had to secure their own private arrangements, often at the cost of over $1 million a year. In California, high-profile security firms handle their protection, operating with military precision and charging rates reflective of the danger involved. These aren't just bodyguards. These are specialists trained in counter-surveillance, cybersecurity, and asset protection. It's a necessity for people in their position, but it doesn't come cheap. Meanwhile, their Archewell Foundation, a non-profit position to be the philanthropic heart of their post-royal identity, was launched with fanfare. The stated mission was ambitious: uplift communities, support mental health, empower women, build resilience in youth, and create storytelling with social impact. But the implementation has proven far more complicated. Initial financial reports for Archewell showed promising figures. Millions raised, partnerships with organizations like World Central Kitchen, and contributions to COVID-19 relief efforts. But as years went on, troubling signs emerged. By 2023, multiple insiders were leaking reports of internal chaos. High-level staff departures, management disputes, and inconsistent messaging plagued the foundation. This decline in donor trust, coupled with increasing scrutiny from charity regulators, likely contributed to the couple's cash flow concerns. For a foundation like Archewell to grow, it needs constant funding, not just one-time donations. But their public controversies, combined with increasing financial transparency requirements in both the US and UK, made high-profile donors nervous. There's a difference between supporting a royal and attaching your brand to a celebrity couple engulfed in near-constant media warfare. So, when Harry submitted his loan request to the UK government, it wasn't simply about personal finances. It was about sustaining the infrastructure they had built around Archewell, and by extension, around themselves. The $10 million wasn't a luxury request, it was a survival calculation. Without new capital, the house of cards they had constructed might begin to fall. Moreover, the loan pitch reportedly included a detailed forecast of Archewell's future plans. Documentaries, community programs, environmental initiatives, and global education campaigns. But there was a catch. These plans required upfront capital. Production doesn't wait. Neither do contracts. Without bridge funding, there was no guarantee these projects would ever see daylight. But why didn't they turn to private investors or banks? The answer lies in risk and perception. Banks were reportedly hesitant. Despite their fame, Harry and Meghan have no verifiable commercial track record. They are not Jeff Bezos or Elon Musk. They don't run a product company or a SaaS business. Their brand is built on reputation, which in recent years has grown more polarizing. Some private equity firms reportedly considered investing in Archewell Media, but backed out after observing social media sentiment and internal instability. Private investors, especially in the entertainment and philanthropic sectors, prioritize stability and scalability. And while the Sussexes have media experience, their tendency to generate headlines for the wrong reasons made many wary. Every investor wants exposure, but not at the cost of being dragged into royal feuds and tabloid wars. In addition, the couple's ties to politics complicated the financial optics. Meghan's ambitions in American politics, whether rumored or real, made some backers nervous. Donating to Archewell could easily be construed as donating to a future political figure. That brings scrutiny, regulation, and controversy. So the Sussexes, facing limited options in America, looked back toward the UK. Perhaps they believed that their roots would still carry weight. That, despite all the headlines, Britain might see value in supporting them, not just as a gesture of goodwill, but as a strategic move to reforge ties. If Archewell succeeded globally, they reasoned, the UK could share in that success. But this calculation underestimated the political mood in Britain. The country is still grappling with economic instability, rising inflation, and a divided electorate. Public sentiment leans against special treatment, especially for those perceived to have disrespected the crown. A £10 million loan to a Prince Stern podcaster living in California was never going to land well with voters. And politicians knew it. Insiders say Harry's application included a repayment plan. The loan, according to one Treasury source, would be fully reimbursed within 5 years through proceeds from content development, speaking engagements, and foundation licensing. But government officials were skeptical. Archwell's actual revenue streams remained opaque. Promised returns were speculative. The UK Treasury isn't a venture capital firm. It does not deal in hypothetical success. Another factor weighing against approval was the precedent such a loan would set. If Harry, a former working royal, received public money, what would stop other ex-royals or disgraced aristocrats from applying? The optics were simply too dangerous. The message it would send, that a member of the royal family, stripped of active duty and self-exiled in the U.S., could dip into public coffers during a financial lull, it was politically radioactive. And behind all these financial moves, one can't ignore the emotional motivations. Harry has often spoken about continuing his mother's legacy. Diana was known for her charity work, for humanizing the monarchy. Archwell, in some ways, was supposed to be a modern reflection of that spirit. But philanthropy requires funding. And despite their visibility, Harry and Meghan now found themselves in the paradox of being famous yet financially strained, known by millions but trusted by few with their money. Their bet on independence required consistent wins, high-performing content, well-managed foundations, and public goodwill. But the content underperformed. The foundation stumbled, and goodwill has grown thin. All of it, piece by piece, led to that desperate ask. The irony is bitter. The Sussexes wanted to free themselves from royal dependence, to prove they could succeed on their own terms. Yet within 3 years, they were requesting financial assistance from the very nation they walked away from. And in doing so, they revealed a harsh truth. Building an empire outside the monarchy is far harder than they imagined. When the news of Prince Harry's rejected $10 million loan request broke across the United Kingdom, the reaction was immediate, visceral, and deeply personal. It wasn't just a story about a former royal seeking financial assistance. It was a spark that ignited public fury across class lines, age groups, and even political affiliations. Within hours, the British public wasn't just digesting the information, they were reacting with a sharpness that bordered on rage. Headlines might have framed the issue diplomatically, but the public stripped away all nuance. They saw one thing: a multimillionaire royal asking for taxpayer money in the middle of a cost-of-living crisis. That perception alone was enough to make the nation boil. From online comment sections to talk radio to pub conversations in Manchester and London, the mood was one of stunned disbelief. "How dare he?" was the common refrain. For a public that had grown increasingly disillusioned with the monarchy's entanglement in modern affairs, Harry's request confirmed the worst suspicions. He had left. He had attacked the institution. He had called the British media racist and the royal family uncaring. Now, he was back, asking for cash. On Twitter, the backlash was relentless. Thousands of posts slammed Harry for what many saw as breathtaking entitlement. You abandon your country, you insult your family, you trade your secrets for Netflix dollars, and then you want our money? One user wrote. That tweet alone received over 250,000 likes and was reposted by celebrities, activists, and ordinary citizens alike. Another user posted a photo of a struggling NHS nurse holding her payslip, juxtaposed against a photo of Harry in a Montecito mansion, captioned simply, "This guy wants your money." The timing of the loan request couldn't have been worse. The UK, still reeling from the aftershocks of the pandemic, was facing inflation levels not seen in decades. Energy prices were up. Groceries were more expensive. Mortgages had climbed sharply. Public sector workers, from teachers to nurses, were striking for better pay. In this context, the idea of giving a Hollywood royal millions in public funds felt not just wrong, it felt insulting. The tabloids jumped on the sentiment with both hands. The Daily Mail ran a front-page headline screaming, "Not a penny more." The Sun featured a mock-up of Harry with empty pockets turned inside out, standing in front of No. 10, Downing Street with the headline, "Begging for a bailout." Even more moderate papers, like The Times and The Telegraph, ran columns questioning the optics and wisdom of such a request. Editorials criticized Harry for failing to read the room, for misjudging the national mood, and for attempting to tap into a system he had vocally renounced. The backlash wasn't limited to the media and the general public. Influential political voices weighed in with sharp criticism. One Labour MP took to Parliament to say, "It is grotesque to even entertain the idea of funding royals abroad when our own people are choosing between heating and eating." A Conservative peer added, "If Prince Harry wants to play entrepreneur, he should learn that in the free market, you rise or fall on your own merit, not with the assistance of British taxpayers." There was, however, a more profound cultural undercurrent to the backlash, one that went beyond economics. Many British citizens viewed the loan request as a betrayal of national pride. Harry had been the golden son, the one who served in Afghanistan, the one who started the Invictus Games. He had once symbolized the human face of the monarchy, a bridge between royal tradition and modern compassion. But over the last few years, that image had crumbled. His Oprah interview, his memoir Spare, his Netflix series, all of them had contributed to a growing sense that he no longer respected or valued the country that once adored him. Now, to those same people, it appeared that he wanted to benefit from the system he had attacked. The irony was too thick to ignore. This wasn't just seen as hypocrisy. It was seen as gall. Even among those who had once defended Harry and Meghan, there was disappointment. British millennials, who had championed Meghan as a breath of fresh air and had supported their departure from the rigid confines of royal life, were now questioning the couple's motives. On Reddit and Instagram, younger audiences voiced concern that the couple's activism was beginning to feel performative, that behind the social justice language lay a deep desire for control, relevance, and yes, money. The class divide only deepened the response. Working-class Britons who had been asked to tighten their belts, accept wage freezes, and pay higher taxes were being told that a man living in a California mansion with celebrity friends, private jets, and Netflix documentaries needed public assistance. The anger was not theoretical. It was raw. A single mother from Birmingham told a BBC radio caller show, "I'm behind on my rent. My electricity bill's gone up." And this man, who said he didn't want anything to do with Britain, wants millions from the government? He can sell one of his houses. A pensioner in Liverpool echoed the sentiment. He wants to act like a celebrity? Fine. But don't come crawling back here when Hollywood turns its back. Britain isn't his backup plan. Another layer of resentment came from veterans. Harry had long prided himself on his military service and his support for injured service members through the Invictus Games. But some veterans felt that his recent choices undermined that legacy. One former Royal Marine anonymously told The Times, "Harry was one of us. He earned respect. But now it feels like he's cashing in on that respect. There's only so far legacy can take you." The fact that no member of the royal family came to Harry's defense during the media storm only heightened the perception that he had alienated everyone, including his own blood. Not a single word from Buckingham Palace. No statement from King Charles. Nothing from William. The silence was loud. In that vacuum, conspiracy theories flourished. Some believed Harry's request was a veiled attempt to regain relevance in British public life. Others speculated that he was testing the waters for a quiet return. One that would allow him to claim he tried to build a future outside the royal fold but was forced back due to lack of support. Whether any of this is true remains unproven, but the mere existence of such speculation underscores the depth of public distrust. There was also a broader geopolitical dimension to the backlash. Britain, once the heart of a vast empire, is now a country grappling with its post-Brexit identity. National pride has become more territorial. The idea of Britishness has sharpened. And in this climate, someone like Harry, perceived as cosmopolitan, woke, Americanized, represents everything that certain segments of British society resent. His loan request didn't just offend financial sensibilities. It offended nationalistic ones. Even in Scotland and Wales, regions with their own complex relationships with the monarchy, the reaction was icy. In a Glasgow cafe, a small group of locals watching Sky News shook their heads in unison as the segment aired. "He's not one of us anymore," one man said. He made that clear. Yet, through all the criticism, a smaller, but still vocal group of supporters tried to reframe the narrative. They argued that Harry was not asking for a handout but proposing an investment with societal returns. They pointed out that British politicians often waste far more money on failed projects and vanity infrastructure. A few even suggested that the backlash was driven less by economics and more by lingering discomfort with Meghan's race and the couple's refusal to conform. But these voices were largely drowned out in a sea of mockery and scorn. By the end of the first week, The backlash had solidified into a collective judgment. Harry had overstepped. He had misunderstood his new role in society. He had asked too much of a public that already felt overburdened. He had, in the words of one tabloid, misread the kingdom. And now, as the dust settled, the Sussexes were left with a painful realization. Whatever affection or empathy once lingered in the hearts of the British public had been tested, and perhaps extinguished, not by interviews, not by accusations, but by a simple ask, scribbled on a government form, requesting help from a nation no longer willing to give it. Long before the headlines screamed about loan rejections, long before Treasury memos and leaked documents exposed financial desperation behind the Sussex brand, there was Meghan Markle, an American actress turned duchess who stepped into the most scrutinized monarchy on earth with poise, power, and unrelenting ambition. In the aftermath of Prince Harry's $10 million loan request to the UK government being denied, speculation quickly turned inward. How involved was Meghan in this? Was the loan her idea? Was she the architect behind the financial strategy? Or merely a passenger in a ship already drifting away from the British shore? It's impossible to talk about Harry's post-royal trajectory, especially one that ends in a rejected financial plea, without understanding Meghan's influence on the couple's strategy, brand, and finances. Her entry into the royal family was not subtle. She was never going to play the background role. Meghan's transition from television screens into palace corridors was marked by intensity and disruption. She wasn't Kate, molded by years of discretion and proximity to tradition. Meghan was different, sharp, polished, media-trained, and unapologetically American in her directness. At first, the public embraced her. Here was a biracial, self-made woman entering the widest institution in Britain. But beneath that celebration was a simmering unease, one that exploded after the couple's departure from royal duties. When Harry and Meghan announced they were stepping back as senior royals and moving to North America, many assumed Meghan had been the driving force. She was the new element. She came from outside, and whether fairly or not, the blame or credit for Megxit was largely laid at her feet. Fast forward to the present, and those suspicions have only deepened. With Harry's loan request now making international headlines, observers from both sides of the Atlantic are asking the same thing. Was this a Meghan move? People close to the couple say yes. According to a Montecito-based business consultant who once worked with Archwell Media, Meghan has always taken a strategic leadership role in financial planning. Harry provides the vision, the emotional motivation, the source shared, but Meghan builds the spreadsheets. She calls the lawyers. She sits in on pitch meetings. She's not just a brand, she's the CEO. In the world of philanthropy meets celebrity, Meghan is often described as the brain behind the operation. Archwell, the couple's nonprofit and media company, was her brainchild. It reflects her values, her aesthetic, her causes. The fonts, the tone, the public statements, everything echoes her voice. Meghan believes in message curation, in carefully controlled narratives. That's why when the loan request was leaked, it didn't just reveal a financial hole. It exposed a fracture in the image she spent years curating. Insiders say the loan was meant to be a bridge, nothing more. A stopgap until other funding was secured through production partners, licensing deals, and philanthropy partners. Meghan reportedly believed that by tying the request to social impact goals, education for young girls, mental health campaigns, and media literacy programs, she could position the loan as an investment in the global good, not a bailout for an overextended lifestyle. But even those sympathetic to her goals admitted that she underestimated the political and cultural minefield in Britain. For all her savvy, Meghan didn't grasp the emotional temperature of the UK in 2025. This wasn't just about austerity, it was about betrayal. British taxpayers didn't want nuance. They wanted accountability. And when they saw a woman living in a multi-million-dollar estate, dressed in Dior and Cartier, tied to billion-dollar streaming platforms, asking for government money through her husband, they didn't pause to hear the justification. They boiled over. Back in California, Meghan was said to be furious, not just at the rejection, but at the fallout. Not because the media was unfair, she expects that, but because the strategy had backfired. In private, sources say she felt Harry's name carried enough legacy goodwill to secure the request discreetly. It was a miscalculation. More than anything, Meghan feared what this would do to their brand. She had spent years repositioning the Sussex identity away from scandal and toward purpose. The podcast, the documentaries, the public speeches. All were designed to tell a story. Here are two people who gave up privilege to do good. But when the headlines turned, that story unraveled. From philanthropy to pleading, one critic wrote online. It was a brutal tagline, and Meghan reportedly saw it. Staffers say she became uncharacteristically quiet for days after the leak. When she did speak, it was businesslike, cold. Shut it down, she instructed her media team. No statements. No rebuttals. We don't give oxygen to nonsense. But silence did not stop the speculation. Across talk shows and social media panels, Meghan's name was dragged through every theory imaginable. Some argued that she had pushed Harry to make the request so she wouldn't have to. Others said the loan was her idea entirely, a move rooted in corporate logic rather than royal sensibility. Still others went further, suggesting that Meghan had been mismanaging their finances from the beginning, prioritizing optics over sustainability. This public perception hurt more than just their image. It threatened their financial ecosystem. Meghan had been in talks with several investment funds to co-develop a series of educational documentaries under the Archewell umbrella. Those talks were reportedly paused indefinitely after the loan scandal erupted. One executive cited risk to public trust as the reason. Another, more bluntly, said, "If your house is on fire, I'm not investing in your furniture." And then there's the emotional toll. Close to the couple insist that the backlash hit Harry hardest, but that Meghan felt it in a different way, strategically, reputationally, professionally. Her greatest asset has always been control. Control of message, control of image, control of story. The loan saga wrested that control from her hands and placed it in the public domain. For a woman who once ran her own lifestyle brand, who curated every Instagram caption and interview answer, this was a disempowering moment. It also deepened the divide between the couple and the royal family. While Harry reportedly held out faint hopes that his father, King Charles, might quietly intervene or at least send a private word of support, Meghan had no such illusions. She had long believed the palace would abandon them the moment it became convenient. In her eyes, the silence from the monarchy wasn't betrayal, it was confirmation. This belief, however, created further tension between her and those still trying to build bridges behind the scenes. A few senior royal aides had been exploring unofficial ways to reconcile Harry with the crown, including limited ceremonial roles or appearances. That process is now on ice. One source stated, "You can't make overtures of unity and then ask for public funds in the same breath. It becomes transactional. It poisons the well." To her critics, Meghan's role in this mess is self-evident. To her defenders, she's being scapegoated. The truth likely lies somewhere in the middle. Meghan is not the puppet master, but she is no bystander. She is a strategic force, someone who thinks in chess moves, not checkers. And this move, this loan request, was meant to be a quiet maneuver to strengthen their long-term position. But like all failed strategies, it carried consequences far beyond its initial intention. What Meghan does next will define how this moment is remembered. Will she lean into silence and allow the scandal to pass? Or will she reassert her narrative in a public forum, perhaps a high-profile interview or a carefully timed documentary? Thus far, she has resisted both temptation and impulse, relying instead on tight internal circles and professional fixers to stem the bleeding. But the damage is already done. The question now is whether it's permanent. For a woman who once stood at the altar in Windsor Castle and imagined a future of influence, grace, and impact, the road has taken a sharp detour. And though she's no longer standing beside the Queen or gracing the Buckingham Palace balcony, she remains just as central to the royal conversation, albeit in ways she never intended. As this financial fallout unfolds, Meghan's role will continue to be scrutinized, questioned, and perhaps misunderstood. But one thing is certain, this was not a story that happened around her. This was a story that happened with her fingerprints all over it. Prince Harry just made a stunning financial move, requesting a $10 million loan from the UK government. But instead of support, he was met with brutal rejection. Officials reportedly told him, "You're not a UK citizen." This shocking blow has left Harry and Meghan reeling and raised questions no one expected to ask. Why did they need the money? Why was the request denied? And does this mean Harry has officially lost his claim to Britain? In the next few minutes, we uncover the hidden motives, political undertones, and emotional fallout behind the royal rejection heard around the world. What we found changes everything.